Hi, this is Pamela Wirth from the Hello, Health, and Courage Your Wellness podcast. And today I have Marcus Fernandez, principal of Europe's largest homeopathy school and best-selling author. He's been at the forefront of homeopathic education for over 3 decades. And it's such a pleasure to have you here, Marcus. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
So tell us a little bit about homeopathy, what sort of things that you end up treating or discussing more than others, things people should be thinking about. Just kind of speak to us about, a lot of what this all means for people.
Sure, absolutely. Well, homeopathy, is based on, as a system of medicine, it's been around for about 200 years, but actually the principles go back a lot further. They're ancient principles. And the main principle of homeopathy is called like cures like. So, for example, if you chop an onion up, your eyes water, your nose runs. Well, we use onion in a very diluted amount for people with colds or hay fever with the similar symptoms, where the eyes are running and the nose is running. So whatever can cause something in a large amount, in a small amount, it can cure it. So another example is coffee. So if you drink lots of coffee, you get very animated, agitated, very sort of excitable. Well, we use coffee in a very small diluted amount for people that have those symptoms without drinking coffee. So they say they can't sleep, got a rush of thoughts and ideas. So again, whatever can cause something in a large amount, in a small amount, it can cure it. And that's really the basis of homeopathy, like cures like.
Super. And then, so tell us a little bit about when you're teaching, where do you start and how does this fit in with integrative and functional health when people are trying to get to the root of what's going on?
Yeah. Well, often people get into homeopathy is often through their kids, through their children, like most of us. Once we have kids, it changes everything from the food that we eat to the car that we drive. And that also includes health and well-being. And often, when you have a child, as you know, you have this little baby and you don't really want to put anything chemical inside this baby. It's pure. It's that purity, and you don't want to do anything to affect that. So often people get in it through children. So it could be, for example, baby's got colic or teething. That's often how people do it, because homeopathy is free of side effects. Mm-hmm. And how the remedies work is like it stimulates the body to heal itself. So often it is through the home. And that's why I wrote a book recently called Homeopathy at Home, because I believe they say charity begins at home. Well, I think health begins at home. And we a lot of the things that we often can go to the doctors for, we can actually deal with ourselves, like our grandmothers or great-grandmothers who had this knowledge. They knew what to do. Mm-hmm. And often people get scared and fearful and will often rush to the allopath out of fear. What's fear? Just lack of knowledge. So often people use it, like I said, in the home. So people, you may have heard of arnica. People have a bang, a bump, a bruise. Often they take the remedy arnica. So people often start with first aid remedies like that. Or if they have a cut or a graze, they'll use calendula. If they say crush their fingers on a door, hypericum. So these sort of first aid remedies that people will tend to go to and are very simple to use. And then people progress on. So, for example, if they have a cold or a cough, they'll try these natural remedies first, homeopathic remedies first. And the difference there, when you get into things like coughs and colds, in homeopathy, we could all have 5 people could have a cold, but we would all have individual symptoms. Yeah. So it's just not like the allopathic model of one size fits all. You have a cough, you get a cough mixture, which suppresses the cough. Whereas in homeopathy, you could have a cough, Pamela, and it could be worse inside, better for going outside, thirsty for cold drinks. And you take my symptoms and I could be worse outside, better inside. That was the opposite, I think, of what I just said. And better for warm drinks. Now, we would both, even though we got a cough, we would have different symptomatology and therefore need a different homeopathic remedy. Mm-hmm. So this is when you start getting much more individual with the remedies. And really, health is about the individual, not one size fits all, which is often the pharmaceutical approach to everything. This is very much about the individual. And in homeopathy, when we look at people, I always use the analogy of the car dashboard. If the oil light flashes, it means there's something wrong in the engine. Now, if you just take the bulb out or suppress the symptoms, there's still a problem in the engine. The car's going to break down 2 or 3 miles down the road. So what we do as homeopaths, we go into the engine, fix the problem, and the light will go off by itself, because symptoms are a sign that whether it's acute symptoms, chronic symptoms, it's the way the body expresses to us that there's an issue. There's an issue going on.
So let me ask this: a lot of the people that we talk to have chronic symptoms that have been going on for a long time, um, and they're kind of they feel like they're out of options. They feel like they've tried everything.
Yeah.
If you were to talk with someone that has chronic autoimmune or autism or is some sort of behavior that is potentially addictive behavior that they're trying to unwind, how would you address some of these things? What would you do? Like, is there a questionnaire or is there like a test?
Yes.
How,
Yeah. So
how would you address that?
Yeah. So basically, I'm a practitioner. I've been a practitioner for 30 years.
Yeah.
When somebody comes in, everybody has a different story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we could all have the same condition, but actually it would manifest in different ways. So our job as a homeopath is we do, first of all, a timeline. So from birth, or even, if they've got the information, in utero, how the birth will go all the way through to where people are now. So it's a timeline, which is your map of that person's life. And that's looking at them mentally, emotionally, as well as physically. So we take all aspects of the person. So, what we do then, draw the timeline, and we take all the symptomatology, what makes it worse, what makes it better, whereabouts it is, the condition, it could be all systemic or it could be local or wherever it is, any concomitant symptoms that go along with that. But then the next question we ask is, when did it all start? And often, Pamela, they've never been asked that question. Well, it started 5 years ago. The next question you ask is, well, what was happening in your life 5 years ago? What was going on? Because we're like a detective. We're trying to find out, again, anything going on, mental, emotional, physical. It could be a trauma. Something could have happened, which I'm just giving you a very basic outline. Something could have happened, often say around that time. And it can be emotional. Not everything's physical, it's emotional. It could have been a divorce, a trauma, a loss, a grief. I see that all the time. People have never been well since that grief or loss or trauma, emotionally. And then they start 3 months later with this physical condition. However, some people can be born in that way as well. And that's in homeopathy, we look at things that people have inherited. So we take the medical history of both sides of the family, the mother, the father, the mother's mother, the mother's father, the father's father, the father's mother, the children, the uncles, the auntie, trying to find out patterns within their health and well-being. And so it is normally you see a homeopath, it can be an hour, it can be an hour and a half, depends on the case, where we do a really in-depth look at the person as a whole.
And then typically what's next? Do you then try something with like an herb? Do you try like a test to determine or use data?
Yes.
What kind of out there?
So we take the case, and what we're looking for is, what is the person presenting now? What is the picture that we see? So as I explained before about the remedies, we're looking at, we have thousands of remedies. We have thousands upon remedies, but each remedy has a mental and emotional picture and a physical picture. Mm-hmm. Okay, so even looking at everything from top to toe, from head to foot, to all these different symptoms. So what we're trying to do is match the remedy to the person's state where they are right now. So like I said, we take into consideration how people are sleeping, all these what we call characteristic symptoms, and then we match them to the state. So for example, as I mentioned about kefir, the remedy coffee, if the person was, they couldn't sleep, the insomnia, rush of thoughts, they could be in terrible pain, like nerve pain, for example. So they might have trigeminal neuralgia, something, really chronic they've had for a number of years. And that matches the picture of the remedy coffee. So if you took coffee in large amounts, the whole senses will be hypersensitive to noise, to light, to, they can't sleep. The slightest little noise wakes them up. So the whole nervous system is affected by external stimulation. So that would fit the remedy picture of kefir. So we're trying to play a game of snap. So whatever people are presenting, there's a remedy that if you took it in a large amount would produce those symptoms. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, when you try something, how long do you have to wait to know whether or not that's working, or we try something else? Like, I believe in homeopathy. There's like it's like one at a time or something, or is that not true?
Yeah. Well, there's different ways of prescribing, so it depends on the case. So we have different tools in our toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
So an example would be everybody's individual, and what we look at is what we call the vital force, which is prana in Ayurveda, is chi in Chinese medicine. We're looking at that vital force. So often it depends on the case. If somebody's quite chronically sick, because we have a thing called potency in homeopathy, which is like the strength of the remedy.
Mm-hmm.
So we would gauge that according to the individual. Now, if somebody had come into me and they've been sick for a number of years, could be sick for 10 years, with quite a chronic condition, the vitality is quite low, I might start with a remedy low and often. So it could be a low potency, like a 6C, and they may need to take that daily or twice a day because their vitality is very low. And it's very physical. If it's something a bit more mental and emotional, and the person's actually vital force is quite good and quite strong, then I may go for a higher potency. Okay. So if I think that the remedy I'm going to give them, and I think the cause of a lot of this is mental and emotional, we need to shift that, then we would go higher in the potency. But really, we normally see people once a month, and we would expect to see some kind of shift in their case within that 4 weeks. Okay, that they're going in the right direction. And
Now,
often
yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
no, what often can happen when you give a remedy, as the symptoms start to clear, then sometimes people get what's called a return of old symptoms. And that's important because sometimes symptoms are being suppressed, especially through medications. So as you start getting the body to heal and they start to shift, then the next layer comes up to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good sign in homeopathy because the body is going back to try to heal what should have been healed before, but may have been suppressed with allopathic
And I think
medication.
some people call that herxing. Is that right? A herx, or the body is herxing if it's
Yeah,
overreacting.
well, we call it Herring's law, which means it's going back. It's one of the signs of health and vitality being restored.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the same thing.
So if someone is considering finding a provider, what sort of things should they look for? What are some things that may or may not be the right fit? Or because it's hard to pick out a good provider
Yeah.
when there's a lot of options, right?
Yeah, so you're talking about practitioner now. Yeah. Well, I think, look, I'm always going to say this because I think it's always the gold standard is, go word of mouth, go with people that have experienced that practitioner and have got good results. So I think that's number one. It really is. I mean, it's because when you're just going online or you're just trying to find somebody online in that way, and it can be quite difficult. If you can't find somebody directly who's had a good experience with a homeopath and is well known, then I would say go and speak to an osteopath or acupuncturist, and often they know good practitioners in your area. So I always think that's a good place to start. The second place is to go to one of the registers, the professional registers that have professional standards. So in America, I think they have the CCH, which is a register, CCH, of certified homeopaths. Again, it depends. It's different all over the world. But I would go look for a homeopath on a professional register. And even if you find somebody, always speak to them first on the phone. Have a chat with them, talk to them, explain your situation. And if you don't feel that there's a good fit with that practitioner, because you could be with them for quite a long time if it's quite a chronic case, then I would say that, you almost interview them and see whether or not it feels all right fit for you. Because this really, as a practitioner myself, it's you're walking alongside people. You're walking alongside them. It's about helping them restore that health and vitality. But often it can be a journey. And I often say to people, say at the end of the case, I've taken the first consultation, often my rule of thumb is if you've had something for, 10, 12 years, say they come in with asthma or eczema and they've had a lot of medications, it's going to take, for every year they've had, it's going to take a month to clear. This is what I expect. So you're looking at, not one remedy is going to fix everything. It could be 10 to 12 months. And I always say to people, are you okay with that? Is that something that you could work with? And they're going to say yes, or they're going to say no. But I always say, let's review it after 3 months and see where we are. So
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of this is you've got to use your common sense, I think, with people.
Yeah. Now, kind of turning to you and your book, and is this something that you think people can actually do on their own, or when they have kind of this written scribe, if you will, out of your published work. Is that something that they actually can do at home, or is that something that they
Yes.
need to do in conjunction with a practitioner? And then this also probably feels to a lot of people similar to things like essential oils. And so how does that kind of come into this too, or not? And
Yeah. Yeah, it's not essential oils, no. Even though it sounds like the similar name, aromatherapy, homeopathy, they all sound the same.
yeah,
No, I mean, homeopathy is a system of medicine. I mean, this is what people have to understand. If you go to places like India, for example, 100 million people use homeopathy as their primary healthcare. You know, we used to, we got homeopathic hospitals here in the UK, not like they used to be, but you know, it is an established medical system. You know, as I mentioned. But I think for everybody, my passion now, after 30 years of doing homeopathy, long time, is actually I've come full circle. And when Hay House approached me to write this book on homeopathy 18 months ago, it wasn't really in my orbit to do it because we teach at degree level with our practitioner training. But actually, it was the best thing I could have done because it took me go all the way back from when I first started practicing, when I used to run a mother and baby clinic here in London. And I used to treat, at the time, I was very young. I was like 23, just qualified. And I was treating these, I didn't have kids myself. And they used to be so grateful. Like, they'll bring little Johnny in with a colic, or, he's sleeping all the way through now. And they're bringing these little presents and cards and gifts saying, thank you so much. I've slept for the first time in a week or 2 weeks. And again, when you don't have kids, you don't really, I was young as well. You don't really understand what that means until I had my kids. And then I really understood what that meant. And what I used to do is teach. I used to run these little short courses, 6-week courses, about how to use, the top 5 remedies for coughs, colds, colics, first aid, to these mother and baby groups. And I get them to buy a remedy kit, which I've actually got one here to show you, little kit here. And these little kits, they have all little remedies in. You can get these from any homeopathic pharmacy, wherever you are in the world. And I used to teach them how to use those remedies. And I could see how when you teach people how to use things, how much more empowered they became, because they go home, they try it, and they go, oh yeah, Johnny fell over and I gave him some arnica and he was back on his feet and he was good. Or Susie had a cold and I gave her some pulsatilla and it was amazing. She all this mucus came out, but she was good, and it only took 2 or 3 days, and she was more vital than she was before. And I'd see that fear dissipate because you're empowering people to take charge of their health and well-being. And so by writing the book, I had to go right back to the beginning again, because really it's an A to Z. It's a guidebook from A to Z. I start off, I think, with anxiety or acne, go all the way through things like coughs, colds, hay fever, impetigo, all these, all the way to the end, which is, I think, warts is the last area. And there, what I've done is put the top 5 remedies, or top 3 remedies, or top 6 remedies for each condition that I, from my 30 years of experience, think that people should know about. And I've also added things from the kitchen cupboard, because sometimes you might not have the remedy, but there's plenty of things in our kitchen cupboard that we can use, be it, turmeric, be it cayenne pepper, be it whatever it is, chamomile tea. Actually, chamomile tea, amazing. I knew how good chamomile was. My God, it's virtually good for everything you can think of. So it's just really to empower people in their house, in their homes, things they could use first before you have to seek help. And again, just to empower people to use it and to see the results and realize that the body, and I truly believe this, Pamela, with every ounce of my being, all the healing wisdom we're ever going to need is within us. Well, it is within us, and we've just got to turn the key in that lock, I feel.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. When it comes to nutrition, obviously that's a big piece.
Yeah.
And I was raised in a big Catholic Irish family where sugar was a treat and a sign of love. And obviously I've had to redo my signs of love, knowing how bad sugar is for the body now. But, how do you help counsel people on when they're doing these things? What sort of diet changes or things do you want to make sure that they're including or not including?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's out of the realms of homeopathy, but as a practitioner, I feel that I need to know about that. And so what I do, look, I'm very simple. I like to keep things very simple for people. I don't want to overwhelm them. Mm-hmm. And people often ask me, what should I eat? And I say, well, start off by eating real foods.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you mean by that? Well, if it comes out of a box and from a factory, it's not a real food. If your grandmother would recognize it, then it's a real food. So
Yeah.
start off with that. So, you got to start off where people are at. And they think, okay, yeah, I think I can do that. So I said, try go for 80%, 20%. Okay, have a little cheap, but start off with 80% for the first stage.
Yeah.
So that's my basic advice, in the very beginning with people. If I feel they need much more than that, then I will recommend they go and see, somebody else like a nutritionist or whatever. But actually, you'd be surprised how people can shift by just starting eating real food.
Yeah.
And also that people don't realize what real food is. That's what often surprises me, So I often will say that, and obviously, drink plenty and water and different things like that. But it's just some very common sense advice.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. Anything else you want to touch on that I forgot to ask about?
Not really. I just think with I think it's just with homeopathy, it's just a different way. Like a lot of these complementary medicines, like acupuncture or different things, where we are stimulating the body to heal itself. And to me, with the remedies, it is like a key to a lock. You are finding, the key in itself is not powerful. So the remedy in itself is not powerful. But when you take the remedy, and if it's the right key and like an ignition of a car, the engine starts to go, then that's all you want to be doing is getting the engine going again. So the body then does all the work.
Yeah.
And I think this is the difference with homeopathy and allopathy, whereas you got to keep taking the drug, you got to keep taking it. But the pharmaceutical industry is not in the wellness business; it's in the sickness business. And as long as you understand that model, then you realize that that's why you got to keep taking the drug. But with homeopathy, a bit like acupuncture. You have acupuncture. You have the acupuncture needle. It's trying to unblock the chi that's blocked, and it's just there to stimulate that, and the body then does the rest. So I think my message to everybody always is, health is innate. Health is innate, and you already have it. You've just got to try to unblock it or unblock the blocks that are there to get back to that innate health. So that's my overriding message, I think, for everybody. And when I first heard about homeopathy, I didn't know anything about homeopathy. I mean, this is in the book. I was in a band. I was 20 years of age. I was going to be a rock and roll star, and I had to work at this nursing home to to earn some money because we were going on tour, and I was a struggling musician, never had any money. I started working in this nursing home with the elderly, which was so far removed from my reality. And I was having a cup of coffee one morning in the coffee room. This nurse said to me, she started talking about she was doing this course, and she said what it was. She said, "You know what, Marcus, you'd make a really good homeopath." And I never even heard I'd never heard the word before in my life. And she explained what it was, and she said, "Look, I'm going to this open day with these. I'm going to start this 4-year course. I'm going to start learning about it. Why don't you come with me?" Anyway, cut a long story short, the day before this open day. And I wasn't really intending to go in, but I thought maybe she was a bit lonely. She wanted me to come with her. I'd agreed to go. But the day before I was supposed to go, I woke up with terrible tonsillitis. And I used to get this all the time. I was a singer in a band. I smoked, I drank. I wasn't very healthy. But I got tonsillitis since I was a kid. And I thought, right, I'm going to try this homeopathy. If it works, I'll go to the open day. And if it doesn't, I won't go. So I went down to the local health food store, looked at all these weird and wonderful remedy names like Gelsemium, Arsenicum, Nux Vomica, which I thought was a great name for a band. All these weird, wonderful names. And I've got a remedy called Gelsemium, which I took, and I went home and I opened the little bottle and I thought, if this works, I'm going to go tomorrow. And if it doesn't work, I'm not going to go. And I popped the remedy. And literally, Pamela, within 20 minutes, I fell asleep in the chair that I was sat in at home. And I woke up 2 hours later and I was soaking wet with sweat, absolutely wringing wet. Wow, that was powerful. And I kept taking more, and this happened all day. And I woke up the next morning and I had no tonsillitis. And that was 32 years ago. I've never had it since. And I went to the open day, and the man was speaking. He'd been a practitioner 40 years, explaining what he'd done about homeopathy, about cases, and all. And I remember going really quiet inside when he was talking. There was a real stillness. And it was like I was hearing truth for the first time. There's something inside me resonated with what he was saying. And I thought, if this is true, what he's saying, how come the whole world doesn't know about it? And then my second thought was, I'm going to make sure the whole world does know about it. And
Wow, that's fabulous. I'm definitely going to make sure your book notes are in the notes, the show notes, and we will definitely get your message out. So thank you so much, Marcus.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you for having me.